Why are we unique? Why are we the only human race left on Earth? What made us better than Neanderthals, Denisovans, and apparently the Floresians? Yes, the little hobbits that inhabited the island of Flores in Indonesia. Now, what made us unique? There's been many hypotheses out there that have been thrown out, that have been developed. Was it our intellect? No, it's been proven that Neanderthals and Denisovans had as much of an intellect, quote unquote, as we do. Was it our tools? Maybe. Was it some other aspect? Like, was it our culture that made us superior to our cousins? Again, possibly. We don't know. We know that Neanderthals had art. We know that Neanderthals may have had music. Still debatable. In fact, I embarrassed myself in front of a scholar because I won't make excuses. I embarrassed myself in front of a scholar, and when I read her paper, I retracted it immediately. My embarrassment again. Yes, John, I embarrass myself very regularly, but I know when I'm wrong, and I always acknowledge it, and I always want to learn. So what makes us unique again? There's this new hypothesis that's been making was posted late last month, on the 31st, last day of July, and I have the article here. But I also have a Twitter postings, a thread of one of my favorite paleoanthropologists, evolutionary archaeologist, whatever you want to call him, and he's an archaeologist. He's a paleoanthropologist. His name is John Hawkes, and I will get back to that when I first start off the article. It's from Discovery. I've linked the actual study that they mention in the description. Unfortunately, it's behind a paywall, but it's there. I can't help it. As I said before, I can get the text through other means. I will not post it here because it's immoral, and I wish science science was more, after the studies were paid for by grants, etc. Would the actual articles would become free to the general public. That might be a good way to further the knowledge, or the provision of knowledge to everyone, if you make these studies available to everyone. So let's begin. The new thing is called the generalist-specialist. Why Homo sapiens succeeded. I'm not monetized anymore. I just told them to jump off the cliff, YouTube. So I can say now Homo sapiens without any problems. I can say all the words that have to be said. So there we go. This article starts off nicely. Some animals are jack of all trades, some masters of one. Now, yes, they are. Animals specialize. They are specialists in their. Some are generalists, like we have a bear, we have raccoons, we have the boars, pigs, and we have us. Right? We generalize. And some are specialists. We have hummingbirds, which only are specialized in obtaining nectar. We have whatever animals specialized. I'll stick with that because that's the one I thought of readily, because they are super specialized animals, birds, which actually each species apparently only goes after one type of plant that is highly specialized. Homo sapiens argues Summer Masters 1, Homo sapiens argues a provocative new commentary are an evolutionary success story because our ancestors pulled off a unique feat, being masterly jacks of all trade. So we apparently, this study says that we are the specialists in generalization. So we are generalists. So we are specialists in everything. But is this ecologicalness, the generalist specialist, the real reason our species is the last hominin standing? Well, hominin, yes, it's correct. Our closest relatives, the pan troglodytes and bonobo monkey chimpanzees and the common chimpanzees are hominids. So yes, are they? I'm going to now show you what John Hawkes has to say about it, and these are basically what I also agree with. So I'm making his words mine generally. We shall see. He posted this thread on the 31st of July when this study was released. Back on this generalist specialist thing, I don't think it really works as an explanation to the success of modern humans relative to other hominins. I also don't agree totally. It could be just one of the possible features that made us more successful than, well, that made us get to here. That we are the last hominins of our species. He says that the idea that modern humans, make this a bit larger so you guys can see, had the plasticity to succeed via learning, cultural adaptation in environments where other hominins did not succeed. Example, desert, tundra, high plateaus. And he provides nice maps. I love these maps. These maps are in the actual study, but damn it, we can't get to them, you know. So we can. I can get to them, and there are ways to get to them. And I've explained that before, guys. If you want to go back to my other videos just to find out, there are ways, but I can't morally put them in as my sources. I can't do that. Have you understand? This aspect of the idea is pretty novel. Usually anthropologists would put this in the other way. After modern humans successfully driven archaics to extinction, only then did within modern human competitive pressure drive them into more extreme environments. Yes, that's what I agree. Now, he goes on, he will continue. Instead of generalist specialist idea, that is the ability of specializing into an extreme environments, gave modern humans dispersal corridors that have been left open by archaic humans. What he's saying that our generalist specialization allowed us to move into areas that were left open by our archaic ancestors, archaic quote unquote, and Neanderthals and Denisovans. But this seems to work if you consider deserts as avenues for dispersal and accept evidence for modern human presence in Sahara, Arabia, and Thar at dates in this figure without fossils. So, like I said, we need physical evidence that these corridors, quote unquote, because he's providing it, at about 100,000 years ago, and between 100,000 years ago, there were expanses of desert which were greater than they are now. And that's when our species, modern humans, anatomically modern humans, were beginning to expand out of Africa into other areas. Again, there were other modern humans, Homo sapiens, not Homo sapiens sapiens, but we'll call them archaic Homo sapiens, but I still think they were Homo sapiens sapiens. Because genetically there is evidence by geneticists that we sort of emerged possibly around for the latest date, which I've talked about before, is about 500,000 years ago. The latest date, but our bones have only been dated to 300,000 years ago, and they have features that are still not as ours are. They had different, more still pronounced brow ridges. Their cranial capacity was different. Their actual the skull, for example, Jebel Irud, 290 to 350,000 years ago. It's dated, and it's still debatable for many people until it's settled whether he's a Homo sapiens sapiens. They've given the hypothesis that he may be the last variant of Heidelbergensis, Homo heidelbergensis, our last direct ancestor of Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens sapiens, Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, and Homo sapiens denisovensis. I'm going to call him Altaiensis. I hope that catches on, because he hasn't been named. The Denisovans haven't been named. And if you go for the way that's everyone, Floriensis, Homo floriensis from the Flores Islands, the hobbit from Indonesia, that's how. So I'm going to call him from now on, called Denisovans, Homo sapiens Altaiensis. And I hope distinguished people like this paleoanthropologist and Roberto Sainz and others who will hopefully listen to this and say, oh, that's a good name, because he hasn't been named yet, so that's good. So also in favor of the idea of a traditional view of modern human dispersal into Europe, the idea that modern humans were more extensive use of steppe and possibly tundra, given them an avenue around Neanderthals who dominated the Balkans and southern Europe more broadly. That's where we found the bones. Okay, so what he's saying, because where between the Balkans and southern Europe, below, if you guys know, get a map of France, and you find Tours, the city of Tours, that's south of Paris. That's where he's talking about the general. That's where we found bones, but we've also found bones in Germany, Neander. That's where they found Neanderthal. See, the Valley of Neander. So that's what he's trying to argue, that it's problematic. I hate that word, but I have to use it. But some of the problems with the idea: first, the evidence of modern human occupation in most of the extreme environments is either A, not clearly modern humans. Like I said, the first example of Homo sapiens neanderthalensis was found in the Neander Valley in Germany. That is north central Europe, northwest central Europe. It's the west, but it's north of Europe. It's not southern Europe, right? And the other one is that there's tens of thousands of years after Neanderthals and other archaic humans are gone. So they're getting these occupations or evidence, fossils, presents, etc., in areas that are much, much later than the last living specimen of the archaic. I don't like that term archaic for Neanderthals, and yes, they are somewhat archaic, but I'll accept it. Yes, other archaics, human, our cousins, the other races of humans. So if you take a look at rainforest occupation, the traditional view is that rainforests were only occupied very late in human evolution. We now have a bit of archaeological evidence that early rainforest utilization in Africa much later in Southeast Asia. Again, he's showing the map with states, Africa around 200,000 years, Sri Lanka 38,000 years, Amazon basin, 13,000 years, but that's naturally because it took them the earliest evidence of human occupation in the Americas has been pushed back to about 18 to 20,000 years. That's fine. That's awesome. We are pushing back the science. We're pushing back the dates that have been accepted, and that is awesome. So, both in Central Africa, we have no idea who was in the rainforest early, etc. And there were other hominins beside early modern humans. Homo naledi, he was present around the 200,000, 250,000 year mark. So that's another hominin that would live contemporary with modern humans, Homo sapiens. If you take the date of Jebel Irhoud as Homo sapiens. So he basically goes on to show his evidence in Southeast Asia. There's the rainforest inhabitants around 70,000 years. There were dispersal corridors if moderns were in southern China by about 100,000 years, etc. He presents the evidence, and the most striking one here, when I locked down, I talked about the Gravettian people. Sure, the Gravettian people had different material culture. That's what I said. What was the difference between Neanderthals, which used the Masturian and possibly the Aurignacian culture? I've talked about that in the evolution of stone tools, and to the Neanderthals, there's lots more pigment, more evidence of throw points, more blades, more specializations of prey species. So the Gravettians, as I said, they specialized because of their tools. They were highly, highly specialized tools. But they were later. They were around the 30,000 year mark. By then, the last Neanderthal had already gone extinct that was Gibraltar, or close enough to it, between 30 to 22,000 years. I will continue, obviously, the series. I know I haven't forgotten the series. We stopped at the Gravettian. Next one is the Solutrean. That is my. I think I did. No, I haven't done the solution. That's the period which I did my Bachelor of Arts dissertation. I did a paper on it. So yeah. And he talks about the Southeast Asia. It's even worse. They just can't find the difference between the stone tools between modern humans and Homo floresiensis. So yes, let's go back to the article. Paleoanthropologists and archaeologists define what makes our species unique. True. Also biologists. Not forgetting biologists as well. They usually focus on our use of symbolism and language. There was an article that I haven't done the paper. It's about the FOX2A gene in our that is apparently linked to speech, and the study goes. I just read it briefly, so I'm not completely. It's not stuck in my head yet. I have talked about that gene before. That and another one that governs our skin colors, hair color, eye color, and other features that shows that basically all humans have those genes, all of them. The way that they're expressed or not gives us our color of our skin, of our eyes, etc. Every human has those two genes, which I already talked about, and everyone on Earth living today has them. Some are expressed differently, giving a different color, lighter color skin. Some are off, give a lighter colored skin, on, give a darker color skin, and the variations between. So we are all one race. So that ends the thing. So the researchers have uncovered evidence that other members of the genus Homo, notably Neanderthals, were capable of similar cognitive processes, from artistic expression to producing fire at will. I've made a video on fire. Fire was possibly first, quote-unquote, domesticated by Homo erectus around 600,000 to 700,000 years ago. There is enough evidence to show that. Maybe they didn't produce it, but they did utilize it. That's the difference between the two. There's a difference. So maybe to say two researchers, but maybe say two researchers, we got it wrong. What defines our species? What has allowed Homo sapiens to survive and even thrive after all other hominins went extinct? It's not about making better stone projectiles, no, or networking. That is a stupid quote, networking. That's cooperating. All hominins cooperate. All primates cooperate. Well, all higher primates cooperate. Even the solitary ones, the baboons, no, the orangutans, the gibbons, they still cooperate in some ways. So, or sprucing up the cave walls with a little ochre artwork. That's nicely put there. We're the last hominins on Earth because we're really good at adapting to a huge range of environments, including the extreme. Well, as John Hawkes said, not really. First of all, Neanderthals adapted to the extreme cold of ice of the glacial period in Europe. The Denisovans, far off to the east, adapted to the extreme high altitude of Tibet, and the genes that they passed on to the modern day Tibetans, for example, and allow them to adapt to live at high altitude. So that's just a little tidbits. We can adopt, even those without the Denisovans genes. If we go live at high altitude in 7 or 8 months, we can adapt very well. So we produce more red blood cells to compensate for the lack of oxygen, for example. Here's the map. To make their case, researchers mapped out a likely range of archaic members of the genus Homo, according to current fossil, paleo-environmental, and archaeological evidence. Being a fan of the scientific method, I'm not a fan. I adopt it. There's no need to be a fan. It works. I think it's worth noting that here, this map almost certainly will change as new finds turn up. Absolutely. The map is a little bit simplistic, but it's fine. I got here a mixture with archaic African hominins. There's the new papers out there. I was going to do another one about that. We were more widespread in Africa than previously thought. For an example is Jebel Irhoud in Morocco compared to not Omo, that's a valley in Ethiopia, if I'm not mistaken, which held the OMO. It held the record for, well, it held the up until Jebel Irhoud, the oldest date for our species. And there's also from South Africa, also around the 200,000 year mark, of more fossil evidence of our species around the 190 to 200,000 years mark. So we were quite widespread, and that's why I'd say that there's an admixing. Yes, we mixed from all over that continent, African continent, and then we moved out. So it's clear that early Homo sapiens, once they left Africa, seemed to explode across the old world, moving into territories previously occupied by one or at most two other hominin species. Yes, Denisova, and that you can see where it is. There's a Neanderthal admixture they show here in the this is northern Iran, Shanidar Cave, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Shanidar Cave. But there's also admixing in Europe and in the Western Asia, Middle East. And then we had two types of admixture with the Denisovans, but because apparently there's two different types of Denisovans. I've talked about that. But we'll talk about that, and I've talked about that, so I'm repeating. Sorry about that, guys. So it's not immediately evident from the map that early Homo sapiens dispersal wasn't just about setting a foot in a new continent. It was also about moving into new and often extreme, challenging environments. Yes, but they adapted over time, from desert to Arctic climes. But they already lived in. They already had adapted to those conditions in Africa, even though they were while we were evolving in Africa, Homo sapiens sapiens. There were vast shifts in climate from dry spells to wet spells. So there were deserts, the Sahara Desert expanded and contracted in that period of time in about 200,000 years. So as John Hawke's Twitter beautifully presented. So why did we persist? Well, they say that we specialized in generalization. We generalized because we hunted a different species. We hunted more species. We weren't so specific in one type of behavior, but that is obviously shown that it's not, because our other races of humans, Neanderthals and Denisovans, also had vastly wide range of, for example, behavior, and they adopted to areas that were extreme as well. Our start date is now at least 300,000 years ago. It will be pushed back. I hope it will be pushed back. I expect it will be pushed back to around the 400,000 year mark. I will not be surprised that they will find somewhere in Africa a fossil of our species, Homo sapiens, of around close to 400,000 years, and it'll be superb because, as I said in the start of this live stream, genetically, our oldest date is around the 500,000 year mark, when we distinctively split from Heidelbergensis or Antecessor. Then consider, for example, that Homo sapien fossil was found in the Arabian Peninsula. So the first Homo sapien fossil found in the Arabian Peninsula, once thought inhospitable to early humans and described early this year, of a Homo sapien pastoral jaw from Israel that's around 177,000 to 194,000 years old. Yes, I've talked about that this one. It's in one of my videos. So the key to providing their hypothesis is correct. Yes and no, as John Hawkes succinctly provided. We have to be very careful, of course. The rest of the article basically shows what is a specialist. I gave the hummingbird, the panda is a specialist as well. He's a bear, but he's specializing in just eating bamboo. That's it. While the raccoon, I said that, specializes in all sorts of foods. But they're trying to distinguish the generalist-specialist. Number of food web samples. We're specializing in some things and generalizing in others. I'm not convinced, by the way, of this type of thing. We are not really that specialist, generalist specialists. We're not different from. I can, like I said, I concur with John Hawkes. We are not that different from Neanderthals in any shape or form. It's one of the hypotheses, and basically ends here. We occupy a unique niche in generalist specialists. Will no doubt appeal to fans of Homo sapiens as exceptionalism. Exactly, but we are not exceptional. We Homo sapiens sapiens are not exceptional. So it is unclear that provides what researchers describe as framework for discussion. How our species became the last surviving hominin on the planet, we don't know. Specialists tend to face extinction. Yes, they do, and some survive. The panda bear is only, for example, the panda is only becoming extinct because we're sort of getting rid of its territory. And same with other specialists. Yes, there is the pressure on them. If you interfere with them, they tend to go extinct faster than a generalist, like the raccoon, the boar, the pigs, the other bears, for example. But then you have some specialists like the wolves and coyotes. If you don't hunt them, they are specialists. The only thing if you don't hunt them, they adopt. They adapt easily. Adapt easily to changing environments. So that's about wraps it up. I think I'm with Dr. John Hawkes in that this hypothesis is valid. By the way, this is a valid hypothesis. I'm not saying it's not valid. I will not dismiss it. This is a good hypothesis. It'll have to be tested much more rigorously. It'll have to be compared to other hypotheses because there are so many. Disease. Did we carry a disease into the lands we moved? The lands we moved into, where, for example, Neanderthals were. Did we kill them off by diseases? Possibly. Did we just breed them out? There's evidence for that. Possibly. Did we hunt them to extinction? We don't know. There's no evidence that there was any conflict between Homo sapiens sapiens and Homo sapiens neanderthalensis. It's an idea. I wouldn't even call it a hypothesis. It's an idea. And until evidence is provided, like, for example, the murder victims of our archaic ancestor Heidelbergensis or antecessor, and even Homo erectus in Spain in Atapuerca, that's not far from me. The Silla de los Ursos, those cave system where I've talked about them before. There is actually evidence of some individuals being killed. There's evidence of that, but we do not find the same evidence between Homo sapiens sapiens and Homo sapiens and Neanderthalensis of any conflict of the same type of intensity, or even conflict at all. We don't know. So. This is another and one more hypothesis that we can add to our knowledge base. It'll help us figure it out. It will help us in our studies. It'll open new avenues of research, which is just awesome. That is just laudable, and I like this. The new ideas being put forward. We will never obviously find the ultimate answer why we are the last ones here, but we get more knowledge in our search. So I think I'll end it here. Before I do say hello, I'm going to say hello to everyone in the chat. Hello, Carlos. Let's see the people who are there. I'll start from the top. I already said hello to John the Bemused and Giovanna Lidiana. Hello, Modwayne. Hello, Davey and Carlos David, my dear friends. How are you? And Malachite, how are you? Davey, always a pleasure having you guys on. I hope you guys enjoyed this chat. Let's see, any questions? Carlos David, so there was a distinct period of separations due to deserts. Oh, yes, there were. It's documented in most of the sites that we've excavated from the period of around the 200,000 to around 100,000 years ago. For example, there was a glacial maximum that that the glaciers moved south, so the sea level dropped. Became drier in the Sahara area, the Sahara Desert, the Arabian Desert, and there was possibly one of the routes around from Egypt to the Arabian Peninsula. There may have been shallower. The Red Sea at certain points may have been shallow enough for them to cross, and then they could skip around the shoreline, because underwater now there are actual freshwater springs in those areas that date from around that period of our expansion. They're close to the 100,000 year mark, of course. It doesn't explain the earlier 200,000 year expansion of Homo sapiens sapiens into Europe, where they left their genes, where we left our genes in the Neanderthals, and then we reacquired them in the absolute last expansion into Europe. So yes, there were many. The glaciers made the deserts grow and shrink, of course. Anyone else? Okay. I think that's about it. Thank you all for coming along. Thank you. I'm sorry I make you suffer, John. I really do. Oh, poor you. Love you, man. So, and Jaman, it's not the parting of the Red Sea. No, it's I call it the Red Sea. It's the actual body of water that separates Africa from the Arabian Peninsula. It's called the Red Sea, and it has nothing to do with the parting of the Red Sea by Moses. That's not what I mean. I mean, around 100,000 years ago, there was due to the glacial maximum, the sea level dropped about 100 meters, close to 100 meters. So there were much greater land expanses exposed, and the water. There's a little bit of land that they found by exploring that is just shallow enough for make the crossing easier. And that's what I mean. I know it's not. I know that thing, that idea, yeah, Moses and that story. That's it. That story. So I'll leave you guys on. I think it's enough. Thank you for coming to listen to me, and I hope it wasn't that sufferable as my dear friend John Bemused just said. And I thank you all again, and good night.